Thank you again for joining us on the program. Reactions from the opposition in Chad is growing following Parliament's vote in support of a new constitution that would abolish the position of Prime Minister and allow longtime President Idris Deby to serve 2 more terms. Opposition members and civil society groups demonstrated against the new constitution, which was approved in 132 votes in favor of and 2 against. On Monday, it abolishes the Constitutional Council and High Court of Justice and introduces a 6-year presidential term, replacing the current 5-year one.
Chad's President Idris Deby Itno can now be able to stay in office until 2033. This follows the approval of a new constitution in Parliament that expands the president's powers and which reimposes a 2-term limit scrapped in a 2005 referendum. It was passed by 132 votes in the 170-member legislature, with 2 lawmakers voting against. The Monday vote was, however, boycotted by most opposition lawmakers who believe the new constitution is aimed at installing a de facto monarchy in Chad. Following the vote, opposition groups are calling for the text to be put to a referendum. The new constitution introduces a 6-year rather than a 5-year presidential term limit, meaning President Deby could stay in power until 2033, when he will be at least 80.
Well, that constitution also reimposes a 2-term limit that will not be retroactively applied, meaning that President Idris Deby can serve 2 more terms even after the 2021 elections.
Absolutely, Jerry.
Absolutely, and I would like to add that ministers appointed by the president will take an oath before him, and he may also delegate some of his powers to the ministers. One of the main opposition parties, the National Union for Democracy and Renewal, UNDR, said Deby alone will be in charge more than he already was. Denouncing an almost mechanical vote in Parliament, the UNDR has already called on Chadians to protest on Saturday.
With us now is Saleh Kebzabo, an opposition leader from Chad, based in the capital in N'Djamena. Saleh, a warm welcome to the program. It was almost understood that this draft constitution was going to be adopted, the ruling party being the majority in the assembly, but the opposition now deplores the approval. Isn't this surprising?
It's a pity. It's very serious. It's so serious because many things are being called into question in our country. We believe that if it were necessary to move from one state to another, as they claim, with profound changes in political life, we should not turn to the National Assembly. We must go to a popular referendum to submit these to the people. I think that's the least that I can do. We are going to the legislature before President Deby is assured of controlling his National Assembly, as you saw yesterday's results. The constitution was passed by 130 members, I believe. The opposition was absent. I'm saying there is something wrong here. It's just stuck in the throat. This is an additional gamble made by the National Assembly, composed of self-proclaimed parliamentarians, because our mandate ended 3 years ago. And I believe
So, Saleh, you say a referendum to you will have been a better process or choice, but isn't this enough to suggest that, is this enough to suggest rather that that Mr. Deby wants to remain indefinitely in power?
These are warning signs of a regime that's coming to an end, because a reasonable man who ruled a country could not behave this way. We must be able to move forward, even with difficulty, but we must take small steps forward, whereas we are here taking steps backwards. We know that in Central Africa as a whole, leaders are against progress, against democracy, against development. See, the slight catastrophe that has occurred in the last 3 or 4 years with the oil price crisis. The price has gone down and it has become a disaster in all the countries of Central Africa, while elsewhere people have been able to bounce back. I will take the example of a crisis in Mali, which is not an oil producer, which is only a cotton producer. The Malian government is working for national stability. Mali has never had a month's payback. Mali has now become West Africa's leading cotton producer, while in Chad has regressed in recent years to 35,000 tons.
Going forward, what perspectives do you foresee for the future?
The prospects can only be bad in as much as I have spoken to you about an economic base in Chad, which is cotton. Chad was first cotton producer about 35 years ago, about 40 years ago. Today, it is the last. Cotton production affects 3 to 4 million people in the south of the country. Cotton farmers sometimes wait for 2 years to get paid. The company comes to remove the cotton and does not pay them. And as we speak, cotton farmers have been waiting for 2 years for their payment arrears in the country. And who can be happy in a system like this? The pastoralists themselves are in a traumatic nomadism to the whole country. No one supports them. I could spend hours telling you about the deplorable situations in our country. I'm not talking about health. Hospitals are like jails. Even the largest hospitals, like the ones they built some 4 or 5 years ago, which were the pride of Chad, today are zero. We talk about oil. Who in Chad has benefited from oil? There aren't many of them. And those who have really benefited, they have benefited after massive and open diversion of hundreds of billions that have taken the path of tax havens.
A lot of issues there, Saleh, that you are clearly dissatisfied with about the affairs of the country, but I'm afraid that's pretty much all that we can take for now. Opposition leader Saleh Zabo on Chad there and its controversial newly adopted constitution. Many thanks indeed.